Oh my gosh, did you guys hang around? Is everybody still here? I heard somebody come in trying to get my window back. I'm hoping everybody didn't give up. We had a little tech issue. Are you there? I thought I heard somebody come in.
David's here.
Hey, all right. Did you try to get in earlier and didn't think it was happening or what?
I got in. I started on about 2 after, and it was all blacked out, but I just hung out till it happened.
Yeah, my computer's decided to just shut down on me a couple times today. So I was scrambling to get back in before everybody gave up. That's why I just went ahead and sent an email. I said, we're ready. All right, let me get to the gallery view here. All right, there's Mr. Nick. All right, we're going to go ahead and get rolling. And this is such a huge topic today too, man. I was like getting all nervous that I knew you guys would hang in there for a minute. No, with technology, always give it a second or two and it'll come through. But this is a huge topic. I know I'm kind of beating this whole 100 sales database stuff to a pulp. However, today, like the content that's in here, I really think it's going to share with you guys exactly how or why you can see that there is so much business to be had here. So I don't know if before I get going, I mean, your database is your business. I'll just kind of lead this off and say there's one thing I'm pretty confident that I've been able to do well, and that is, from being a maps coach, and I don't know how much you guys know about everything I've been through, all the different roles I've been in Keller Williams, but I opened a market center over 15 years ago. It was the #2 office in Kansas City. Judy's was the first. We were the second. I took over that team leader role at that point only because I was investing in the office and I did not see the current group that was putting that together keeping it in model. They were just kind of flying by the seat of their pants, and there was not going to be much of a Keller Williams culture there. So I kind of stepped in as team leader role, knowing that I could at least protect my investment, investing in that office and getting it open, and then ended up being a partner with Judy and them in that one as well, which is merged to the Lease Summit office now. Anyway, so that I've been a maps coach, part of the Keller Williams International faculty. In fact, if you download a whole bunch of the old training manuals, you'll find little bits and pieces and quotes from Brad in some of those manuals somewhere. And I just assisted with as much as I could there whenever the course writers would call. So the point I'm making on that is there was a course called Your Database is Your Business. It was like a 8-section course on your database. And it really went back to that core thing in the MREA book when Gary talks about Gary's box. And it was basically like I don't know, it was like he had a year calendar, a year, like one of those accordion files that had the whole year's worth of tabs. And he literally had 3x5 cards that he'd write name and address and information about the person on there. And like if he's supposed to call them in 4 weeks in an 8x8, he would plop it down 4 weeks down the road and drop it in there. And then he'd get to that day on the folder, pull out whoever he was supposed to call that day. And if they were on the 8x8, he'd drop them 4 weeks after that. And once he pulled that up, if the 8x8 was pretty much checked off on the card and he moved them over to a 33 touch, then he would put them 4 months down the road and he dropped that card in. And he just did everything with the box. It was very manual. one of the things when they wrote your database is your business is I can pretty much tell what an agent's business looks like just by looking at their database. If I were to take 20, 30 minutes and just open up your contact records and just skim through, I can pretty much tell you about what your business looks like, how many deals you're probably doing a year, and be fairly close. That's how good, that's how accurate the database is, which is what we're going to talk about today, is making that database an actual predictable amount of business, a predictable ROI, and all of that stuff today. So anyway, that's kind of what we're talking about today. And that's the stuff that I'm going to share with you is coming from that background and that perspective. The other thing, there is a book that Gary had me read, which he actually pulled the pertinent information out of this book, and you'll find it in the one thing, and it was Outliers. And in Outliers, the big thing they were talking about is what's the difference between being really, really good at something and mastering something. Or the best way I can put it is like, I don't know if they talked about it in the book or this was just my analogy that I got from it. It's like you can be really good at baseball. Let's just say it's high school baseball, right? You can just kick butt at high school baseball. And some kids advance to college baseball and they might get a full ride scholarship. But then who advances from there to the pro ball, right? To pro baseball, things like that. And what they were talking about in the book is that you can literally tell like 5,000 hours. By the time you put about 5,000 hours of practice into baseball, you're usually in high school. And for the kids that are going to get to college, they're probably spending another 5,000 hours. I should have just muted that. There we go. They're going to spend another 5,000 hours practicing during high school to get good enough to move on to like the college baseball. And then they're going to spend another 5,000 to 10,000 hours. It's basically 20,000 hours of doing something before you're masterful at it. So these conversations I share with you are literally just, I mean, the best way I can put it is I've got over 20,000 hours of sitting in a database, tearing it apart, building it, putting it together, tracking the results, getting the results, watching what happens in it. And all of the numbers that we hear throughout all the stuff throughout Keller Williams actually line up perfectly with your database is your business and the return on investment that you'll get from it. A perfect example that I can use right off the bat is Bold. Has everybody been through Bold? Has anybody not been through Bold? Everybody been through Bold a couple of times? Okay, you guys recall your Bold numbers, like what's the average transaction of an agent that takes Bold? What do they usually do through Bold? Do you guys remember or know what it is?
I'm probably not the best to ask because I did mine virtually because mine was right in the beginning of the pandemic.
Yeah, do you remember about how many transactions they said the average per agent? If you take Bold for 7 weeks, you should average X number of transactions. It's 14. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but let me tell you why it's 14. Okay. The reason why it's 14 is during Bold, the one thing you're supposed to be held accountable to is 20 calls a day. 20 calls a day is 100 calls a week. And in a week, you should go on 1 or 2 to 3 appointments a week while you're in Bold. And you're doing this for 7 weeks. So when they say the average transactions is 14, I just do the math on the database part. 20 a day is 100 a week. It's for 7 weeks. So you're going to contact 700 people while you're going through Bold. Now, what we've been talking about is that should be, if they're moving every 5 to 10 years, it should be somewhere between 700 divided by 10 is 70. And half of that is well, you just add another 70 if it's every 5 years. It's 20% is 140 and 10% is 70 of 700. So out of 700 contacts during Bold, during that 7-week period, so let's just call it 2 months, right? You would have 700 contacts if you actually did that. And if you did that, you have somewhere between 70 to 140 people moving in the next 12 months. So then you divide that by 12 and it's about 10 in a month, and you're in Bold for 2 months. So the numbers, when they say the average person that they've tracked actually closing about 14 transactions during bold, came from the 2 months that there were actually 20 out of the 700 people they contacted that are moving. Not everybody actually does 700. So, it's not going to be 20 because everybody didn't really truly do 700. But from the agents that plugged in and did bold, they were averaging 14. So they weren't getting them all, but it was also during bold. So really, those 700 people are actually going to produce 10 deals a month for the next 12 months, which is 120 transactions. So somewhere between 5 to 10 deals a month every month for the rest of the year, if they stayed in touch with those 700 people after bold. And so one of the things with taking bold is if you just stay bold throughout that and then stay in touch with those people, you're going to have 100 sales a year, no matter what, just by accident. The thing is, most people don't really use their database to build a system to really stay in touch with people. The other thing I'm going to tell you too, as I lead this off, is that what I have found in all the years I was coaching at MAPS, and we're talking big teams and watching how their database is fed in. And I literally, like through my career, is I track, like I would take the total number of contacts in the database every single day for teams. And I would go log in and see what they were the next day and see what they were the next day. And I'm telling you, there was teams of 10 people that they were adding 5 to 10 people a week for out of 10 people on the team. That was one person a week. And what they were doing is they were just putting the people that they were converting and capturing into the system. And they weren't putting all the other people they were talking to that weren't doing anything right now, which kind of goes back to 98% of the people to 99% of the people you talk to aren't moving right now. But 10 to 20% of them will move in the next 12 months. So you got to stay in touch with them. The 8x8 is 2 times, it's on week 4 and it's week 8. The 36 touches 4 times a year. Those things are absolutes and they absolutely have to happen. And they're going to have to happen on some type of automated follow-up, persistent, consistent reminder, because you're only going to keep in touch with about 10 to 20% of your database naturally. And when I say naturally, meaning just trying to figure out who did I talk to 3 months ago that I haven't talked to in 3 months. And every single person that you talked to 3 months ago that was not buying or selling, are they hearing from you every 3 months? There's just no way to keep track of that manually. Now, you guys do a great job of keeping in touch. It's our community in Topeka is a lot smaller and close knit, and we all see each other more often. And I think that's why your numbers are higher on your per sales per agent, where it's 14 sales, because you guys are great at keeping in touch with people. However, I'm still going to say at least 70% of your database has not heard from you consistently, persistently every year, every 3 months. And that's where they just need to have a two-way conversation with you. The big difference here is we don't have to talk about real estate every time we have that two-way conversation. Most of the time, 98% of them aren't moving, and only 20% of them are moving in the next year. So 80% of the people that we're talking to today, this year, we don't need to talk about real estate. We want to throw real estate in every so often to dig up the opportunities that may be there, but it doesn't have to be all about real estate. So before I kick into the slides, is there any questions, any clarification, anything that I've kind of struck something that you want to throw in a comment or anything about databases, conversion, anything like that? All right, are you guys seeing my screen okay?
Yes, we see it.
All right, awesome, cool. So like today we're going to talk about the database. The database is your business. And as much as you heard me probably talk about the database, I think you're going to even see it at an even deeper, more intense mastery level today through these conversations that we're going to have. So this one, we're still, we're on Spark 4, and it's still talking about lead generating for buyers and sellers, but we're going to put it in the context of what is the database. So most people under most databases are a list of records there, and there are people that do have spreadsheets of the people that they have come in contact with, leads, however you want to look at it. And the best way I can tell you the difference of a database is a base that holds data, and I probably said that with you all before. However, with that list, you have to actually go to it to look for somebody that you are wanting to get in touch with. And your cell phone is a database. It is like you pull it up and you're like, I got to call Rich today. And so you're going to search RIC and there's Rich, and you grab it and you call him. And that's what I mean by keeping in touch with about 20% of your database naturally. Is a database is where you're going to look for that information and pull it up. The other part of it that we talked about, and we just talked about this on Friday, was that the 4 laws of lead generation are: build a database, feed it every day. The word every is in there. Every single day you're feeding it, not just feeding in leads. We talked about the difference between leads and contacts. What we're talking about is on the contact side of getting a relationship that you can build that trust and top of mind awareness that you are the real estate spot that they're going to pick up the phone and call when they jump out of the 98% not doing anything and into the 1 or 2% that is doing something. That's when they got to remember to call you and be top of mind. And we played that that game on Friday where we did the product, and you guys listed all the brands. 78% of all sellers talk to one person and list their house. So that's where everybody thinks the marketing and stuff has to really work well and call to action. When in actuality, if you take everyone in the community that knows you and you know them, and you just start building that relationship now, over the next 5 years, you'll have 100% market share for a real estate agent, and you won't need any marketing or any call to action. They just know after 5 years, you're the person to call because you're top of mind and you've earned that trust. Feel free to raise your hands or flash in or unmic and just jump in if you have any questions at any time. And I'll try to take a break in between a couple spots and just ask if anybody's got anything they want to expand on or understand better. But a database is literally that. A contact management system actually helps you nurture those relationships, and it has reminders set up where it's not only sending them stuff automatically. That by itself is probably not going to get you much more business than you're getting now. If any email campaign, any Facebook banner ad, any of that stuff would get us a higher conversion rate than something else, we would all be doing it. The reality is it's just throwing stuff out there with the headline and maybe a call to action that's a little better than somebody else's, but it's always going to be 1% doing something now. With the people, like when you go through Bold and you call 20 people a day, and if you really truly like just wanted to get, like if you told me, Brad, I'm in trouble, I'm not sure how my bills are going to get paid next month, or you're ever nervous about your bills being paid 1 month and you need a sale to make sure that's covered, well, that's 100 phone calls. 100 phone calls is going to generate you 1 or 2 appointments out of 100 phone calls. So if you need 2 sales to cover your bills, then you have to make 200 calls. That's just literally what you're going to have to do. It is a numbers game, and only 1 to 2% are moving. There is no faster way to find 10 sellers than calling 1,000 people. There's no faster way. You can call 100 for sale by owners and still only get 1 or 2 or 3 appointments. I mean, unless somebody has had different results where you've consistently called a bank of people and you get better than a 2 or 3% conversion rate. I mean, is there anybody that has persistently tracked that? Or do you guys feel like it is just calling a bunch of people and getting a few appointments here and there? Kind of the grindstone. Yeah. So it is just about making the numbers bigger. And I'm telling you, I cannot tell you how many times I've had this conversation with a coaching client, and they've literally said, here's how much money I have to make. We just take the average sale divided by the commission and go, okay, it's this many sales. Now, if that's 1 or 2%, then you have to call this many people. And they're like, how can I call 1,000 people this month? And I'm like, you can't. That's because you haven't been working on the relationship side in the database and staying in touch with it so you can build that base up so you don't get caught in these situations. And it almost always comes down to some number that is just not physically possible. Now, the reality is it only takes 5 hours to call 100 people. So if somebody really needed 5 sales this month, I mean, it's going to take you 5 hours to call 100 people to get 1 or 2 appointments. So you've got basically 20 hours this month of true, like picking up the phone and dialing. You just got to have the list of people of 400 people to call to have 4 or 5 sales by the end of the month. Or actually, they wouldn't be by the end of the month. You'd be paid on them the following month. So there's a lag there. So the contact management system really helps you nurture these relationships that, in that same example, if you were going to call 100 people, you're going to probably have 30 or 40, maybe 50 people not even answer the phone if you had 100 numbers to dial. Of the 50 people that did answer the phone, 30 of them or so, 30 or 40 probably aren't doing anything and or tried to get you off the phone as quickly as possible. You're going to end up with about a good 20 people that these 20 people weren't mean. They weren't hanging up the phone. They didn't act like they were bothered by you. They were just being nice. However, of those 20 people, 18 of them aren't doing anything. One of them's just starting the process and maybe is going to do something in the next month or two. And then one person might be like, yeah, I'd probably check and see what my value is. So it's those 18 people that weren't mean enough to hang up on you, that those become what you want to grab onto and nurture, and not nurture about real estate, because they're not doing real estate right now, but they are going to in the next 5 years. All 100 of them are going to do something, but 50 of them either hung up, didn't want to talk to you, didn't have the time of day, and you didn't get them in. Those aren't the people that you're going to put on an 8x8. The 18 people most likely will probably go on an 8x8. And we'll look at that again today, because there's the 19 touch. If they're really not connected, they were just being nice, but you really don't know who they are. If you bumped into them in the store like this week, would you guys know each other, right? That person's probably going on an 8x8 if you had the conversation with them today. And if you wouldn't recognize them, they might be what we call the lead versus the connection, right? So the database will actually produce a very predictable flow of business based on the 10 to 20% that will always be moving. But it's over a year, and it's over 3 years, and it's over 5 years. So if you did 5 a day, 100 people a month. So 5 a day is 25 people a week, right? And it's 100 people a month. It's 1,200 people a year. If you just focused on this for 5 years, you will have 6,000 relationships in your database. And if they're on reminders or campaigns or action plans, or in command, we call it smart plans, right? That has phone calls in there 4 times a year till they become a client. That is where you will have at 6,000 relationships that you call 4 times a year, and it's all spread out. So I'm telling you, in year 5, if you actually did 6,000, you actually might be on the phone for 2 to 3 hours a day, just making follow-up calls, not talking to internet leads, not talking to strangers, talking to follow-up calls. But that will be churning 6,000 divided by 10 years is 600 transactions. And if they're moving every 5 years, it's 1,200 transactions. So it's somewhere between 600 to 1,200 opportunities will actually be happening in just 5 years. And then it's 1,200 opportunities every single year after that. So what that does is that long-term follow-up nurturing helps you deliver a better level of service, strengthen your relationship, be top of mind, so that you are the only person that they're going to call when they're ready to do something. So what's the purpose of a database? For most people, and I'm going to just tell you, I mean, for most agents that have been in business for 10 and 20 and 30 years, especially outside of KW, because I have other organizations that I hang around a lot of top agents in as well, and they have a list of 300 to 500 people in their database. Like, that's one of the first questions I usually ask people: how many people are in your database? Because I can tell a lot about your business by your database. And I cannot tell you how many people that have been in business for 30 years and they say, well, we got 500 or 600 or something like that. That is in 30 years, that is their past client list. It's not even in a contact management system. It's in a database, and it's just a list of their past clients. And then the next question I ask almost always is, well, I always ask it is, when was the last time you talked to all 600 of them? Has all 600 of them heard from you in the last 30 days? Well, obviously, no. That's a dumb question. That's a dumb no question that a coach would ask. But it's like, how many of those 600 people have you actually talked to in the last 2 weeks? And it's probably none of them, right? So it's a list of past clients, not their community. They've lived in the community for 30 years. They know more than 600 people. That is their 600 sales. And usually it's around 300 to 400. And most agents are going to do 30, 40 sales a year, every year for most of their career. And they kind of bump up a little bit here and there. So in 10 years, it's 300 to 400 people in their database. When in actuality, they probably have another 3,000, really 10,000 people in 30 years that have met them in the community, but they just didn't capture them. So the purpose of the database is more than just keeping a list of your past client. What makes the database valuable is staying in touch with it so that when they think of real estate, they just call you automatically and the phone just rings. So whenever we're looking at this, prospecting and marketing and what's the targeted marketing effective, what's effective, guys, just keeping in touch with people is the absolute core thing. If they get something every once in a while with your logo on it and it reminds them of real estate and it reminds them of your name, that's what's effective, right? It doesn't matter if they read the letter. I mean, I'm telling you, they are not reading your stuff. There is nobody in your database except your mother and you that is reading every single thing you're sending out from the beginning to the end, because we're looking for typos and all that stuff. And your mom's just reading it because that's what moms do, right? The only other people that will ever criticize you on your pieces are coaches or other real estate agents. I mean, people aren't reading it. You do it every day. You open your mail and you skim the first line of something. And if you weren't expecting it, or it's not something that somebody was sending to you, you probably read the first line of it and you see who it's from. You don't read the meat in the middle. Or you read the first line of each paragraph as I get a little more detailed with your personality type. And some of you might actually read the first sentence of each paragraph and maybe the last sentence of each paragraph. And that's about it. They don't really read it unless we're looking for it, right? And if something intrigues you, 1 out of 20 pieces of mail, there might be something in there that intrigues you about something about it, and you might actually read it, or you set it on your desk. My gosh, I've always got a pile that just kind of continually grows on what I'm gonna read. Then when it's purge day, it all goes in the trash because that's like, it's been sitting there for 2 months and I haven't read it yet. Guess it's not that important. So there's always good intention, but just know that whatever you're doing is probably what most people are doing. And if you're
Brad, there's a question in the chat too.
Oh yeah, good. I'm glad you popped that up. Let me pull the chats up here. All right. So we got in here, have you ever done featured business week of the month interviews and found success with that? So great question, Steve. Honestly, here's the thing. If it's just coming out of the blue and all of that stuff, it's no success. I mean, there's nothing about those interviews. There's nothing about buying the ad in the paper. I mean, guys, I live in the same world with you. I ran an ad in the publication for the lake community that I live in. She gave it to me for half price. It's $200 a month. I have not gotten one deal from that ad. So I've spent $2,400 for zero return. And the purpose of that ad, I have written it to be different than the other realtors that are in the community. It basically says 30 years, 2,500 sales. That's what we do. We sell real estate, right? So I can use those numbers better than any other real estate agent in the neighborhood. 2,500 sales experience. And it has not gotten me one deal. I've done articles and talked about different things. It's not just going to make a deal come out of it. Now, what those are good for And the reason why I run that ad is because I'm really doing direct marketing to the people that I'm meeting in the neighborhood. And I'm tying that little block ad to something else that I'm sending to them on a more personal note. So there are, I think there was 90 something. Well, there were 3 pages of labels, and there's 30 labels on each page. So it was right around 100 neighbors in the neighborhood. Actually, no, I'm sorry, I take that back. It was 200 neighbors that we've met in the neighborhood in 2 years. They all got a personal card from me this week, a New Year card that has my trailer out front that we did the Griswold. We put lights everywhere. It totally went Griswold. It was a big controversial thing in the neighborhood with my couple of my neighbors that posted something on the Facebook page, and all of our friends just ate them alive and said, "This is fun. We need more fun like this." So I sent them all a personal postcard of it. I literally took a picture of it so they would hang it up on their fridge because they all loved it. They thought it was awesome. So it wasn't doing a postcard mailing to see what I could get out of it. It was to let these people know that we're in the neighborhood and we're moving. And now several of them do call me and say, "What's going on? What's going on? What's going on with this lot? What's going on with that lot?" But so that, to answer your question on that, that by itself will probably not do anything for you. However, if I were to do that and I printed it and it was one of my drip pieces that went to the neighborhood or to the list of people that I've got relationships with, then those people are more likely to actually read it, and I'll earn notoriety or be the expert for that field with that person. But a total stranger reading it is probably not going to turn off the fence on that. So be careful, because a lot of those people will tell you how we're going to interview you. One of them right now is the 5-star award. You guys get anybody else on the 5-star award list? I mean, it's like you could be a 5-star agent, and I've got my interview coming up next week. We're going to interview you and talk about your business. Right behind that is, so to get this interview is $3,000 to buy X number of copies of this magazine and the pullouts and all the other stuff. So they're just selling you advertising is what they're doing. So you got to be careful on that advertising and stuff. Now, the one that's out there right now that's pretty cool is Real Producers Magazine. I mean, it's literally a magazine written for real estate agents, and these guys do interview top agents. They do charge if you want to buy some copies of the magazine, which you don't have to. And it's not really going to go anywhere. It's going to go in their magazine, and it looks cool. And you get one copy of that, and you use that as best you can to photocopy and send to your own personal database. You wouldn't be able to just copy it and turn it into a marketing piece and start marketing it to the general public because you haven't paid for the rights. But if you're sending it to your friends and family who you're connected with, they're not gonna call the magazine and go, "Oh, they're using copyrighted material," right? So okay, so anyway, Steve did jump in here more along the line of Tom's carpentry story and the interview and the actual owner and increase their exposure and sphere. Yes. So local business owners, that is another great way to plug into the community. But I'm going to say it's not far off from where I was already answering the previous question. That is not going to probably generate you a ton of listing appointments just because you do that. What it is doing is it's going to the people that you're connecting with, that you're putting on a nurture plan. They know who you are. You talk to them on a regular basis, and you're selling the community that you all live in so that they'll go to the local restaurant, or they'll know to call you to go to find somebody to do their deck or their fence or their whatever, because you've interviewed some of these people, and they're going to be like, "Man, who was it? Steve. Oh, it was Steve. He interviewed that deck guy. We want to do something with our deck." Now, honestly, Steve should be calling 4 times a year. And in that call, when they're thinking about the deck and you're just calling not about real estate, and you're just saying, "Hey, is there any projects coming up that you're looking for people that you're going to need?" It's like, "Oh man, I'm glad you asked. Yeah, we do need to do our deck pretty soon." Right. So that's probably going to come up in more of the follow-up conversations from the database. So again, the database is think of it more as a contact management system. Capture every single person you come in contact with, and 100% of the business will be captured over time. And when I say 100%, 5 people a day, 25 a week, 100 a month, 1,200 people a year, 5 years, 6,000 people, 600 to 1,200 people will be moving. There's no reason any of us in the next 5 years don't have 500, 600 to 1,200 transactions coming at us a year. The only reason we don't is we don't have 6,000 people in there. We haven't called those 6,000 people 4 times a year for the last 5 years, right? And remember, the last 1,200 people from last year have only heard from us 3 or 4 times, not 12 times like the first year. So the more longer they hear from you, the more you're going to get the call when those things come up. So those are all connection pieces in between your actual phone calls to where you will actually be able to connect them with those people. But they're not going to remember that particular interview 12 months from now. And what I like to do is get stuff like that that's timeless. And I don't do anything timely. It's not on a certain month or a day, remember this day or 4th of July or anything like that. It's more stuff it's generic, green, and I can put 5 people on it today. So that interview might go out as one of my touches at this local restaurant with the guy that owns it, and his Italian whatever is like the most amazing pizza ever, blah, 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 whatever. And that's going to go out to somebody that I add in the database a week from now. And somebody I meet a year from now is going to get that same interview a year from now. So it's all green, and it's just keeping in touch with them. I don't know if did that help answer the question a little bit better? That it's not so much the content that is really going to make it come off. So good. I'm glad you're getting it. And I'm explaining it well. Okay, so here's another cool thing. So really breaking down your contact management system and looking at it at the 3 levels of a millionaire database. So now we're just going back to the millionaire models, and the essential thing with the database, and this goes back to Gary's box, his 3x5 card box. Name, contact info, past business and past contact record, and at will communication. The part that I want to stress here is the contact info. And the best way I can put it is, guys, we sell what? What do we actually sell? What is the thing we sell that we get paid commissions for? Real estate, right?
Real estate.
Yeah, real estate. And when you look at most databases, in fact, Command will tell you the health of your database based on how much of the contact info you have in there. And your health of your database, if it doesn't have an address, is an unhealthy database. And all email database trying to create relationships from email drip plans is not going to get you any further than any of us have ever gotten ever before. And it's that bulk mindset where everything goes out in bulk is always going to get a 1 to 2 to 3% return. Because and again, that's only if you have a great headline and a great call to action. If you don't have one of those things, it can be like a 0.25% return. But if your contact info is your address, which I'm going to share with you, actually, we'll just do that right now, because that's usually the biggest thing people are missing. Here's my little secret formula for finding addresses, as much information as I can. First of all, if it's anybody that I've had a 2-way conversation with, and that today can be digital, I've actually got super, super close relationships with some top like coaching and speaking and authors around the country just from a Clubhouse app that I get on every day. And I'm one of the people that share in there. But man, I know some of the top training people, coaches, authors around the world that literally, if I showed up in St. Louis, I could probably stay at Sam Silverstein's house, and I've never met Sam in person. But yet we connect every single day online, and we share information, we learn from each other, and we thank each other for stuff, and we're genuine about it. Sam, I actually have used these sources to go in and figure out where Sam lives. I found his address, I found his phone number, he gave me his email, but I got his address and his phone number. I sent him a handwritten note and thanked him for his sharing on this app. And so he's like a top author that's written like 12 books, And him and I are like best friends. I know I could stay at his house outside of COVID. Just showing up and saying, dude, I do not have a place to stay. Every hotel is booked. He's like, Brad, you can stay here any day. And we've never physically met before. So how I find that kind of stuff is a couple of things. Like, actually, let me back up, because when I have Sam's name, I Google. That's the first one. That's the biggest secret of all. Woohoo! Google has the answer to everything, don't they? Google to find out, like, just put his name in. And if you have an email, or if you have a phone number, or if you know what city they live in, or anything about it, if you know where they work, whatever the pieces of the puzzle are, you can start with the Google search there. You may find one or two links. And what I typically do is just right click on that and open it up in a new tab right behind the Google. So then I can run through those tabs and see if there's any other information there, like an address of somewhere where his office is he part of a group or whatever. Usually there's going to be an email and a phone number, maybe not necessarily an address. If we're talking about local people in your community, I mean, you're going to have tax records on the MLS, right? That's going to find most people. But another one is Fast People Search, and I'm putting these in the chat box, fastpeoplesearch.com. Oh, this is another great one. You've probably heard of this site, Facebook. Facebook, under their name, you don't have to be friends with them, but you can search for them on Facebook by putting their name in. It'll give you all the different options. Usually there's a picture and you'll either recognize them or you don't. But if you recognize them and you click on it, it'll tell you what city they're born in or from and where they live today. Then I can go back to Fast People Search, because my tabs open up and all my little search tabs are open. I can go back to Fast People Search, type in their name and the city, and it will start finding some options, and it will pull up an old address or whatever. Guys, I will spend personally up to 5 minutes researching. Like, this is a part where I'm going to reveal myself now. Y'all might be sitting there thinking, dude, he is a creeper. He's a creeper, dude. I am the biggest internet creeper in the world. And yesterday I felt the creepiest I felt in a very long time. A couple of girls that used to work on my team back in 2015 are still selling real estate. I mean, they sell, a few houses a month here and there. It's a roller coaster ride, all that other stuff. But Vicky had moved, and I was mailing out some postcards. She was on my Christmas list, and I was going to mail a postcard, and I was like, wait, her and her husband are divorced. Well, Vicky's not like an active person in my database that wasn't on a campaign or action plan, because she's an old team member who's now selling real estate. But Vicky, of all people, should have been on my co-op agent drip plan to build a good relationship with, get her showing my properties, co-oping with. They still list a house every now and then, and I might have a buyer for it. So she was on no drip plan whatsoever, still had her ex-husband's name there, and it was their old address. So just by clicking around, she has a different name. I wasn't able to find her. I spent up to 5 minutes, and I was at the end of my 5 minutes, and I was scrolling through her Facebook feed. See, I told you, this is the creepiest I felt in a long time. And sure enough, she said, we bought our dream home in Holden. Holden was a little house on acreage. And I had seen pictures while I was going through stuff, like around Halloween. They had a big old barn, but their house is real small. It's just a little split entry house. So I'm thinking, all right, maybe she got another house in Blue Springs. I know she got remarried to a loan officer. And I've just lost touch with Vicky, and she worked for me for 3 or 4 years and ran our team. That's just silly, right? Even if she is a competitor, I still should have her on a drip plan and keep in touch with her. She may come back to KW someday and be in my downline, and then I've got profit sharing, right? So I did a little digging, found out Holden, found her husband's name, did a tax search, and boom, found it. It looks like it sold right about the time her post was done, where they said they bought their dream home. I just plugged the holes. So now her information's all updated with her new husband's name, their picture, their address, and I dropped her one of those cards in the mail. She'll get a kick out of it. She'll laugh when she gets it, and she'll probably call me and go, man, we really need to get together for drinks, because we do that every year or two, that we all call each other and go, hey, we're showing one of your properties. Hey, we should really get together for drinks. And we just don't, right? So that's because it's not set up on a drip plan that will just come out of there. And of all people that I'd want to keep in touch with, it'd be them. So I hope you guys are hearing this message, that when I talk about you will naturally keep in touch with 20%, it's real. There's 80% of the people out there are moving on you and they're not remembering to call you yet. Just make sure we don't have any. So I use all those kind of things hand in hand, and my cell phone and my email. I'll search for their name in email, see if they had a signature box on their email that might have had another piece to the puzzle. But every time I get the next piece, I kind of go back to the other piece and put it together. It may feel like you're wasting time spending 5 minutes per person on 10 people. That's 50 minutes. And you put 10 people in your database, what a waste of the day. No, those relationships, as long as you connect with them, write them a note, you've got their address, and you actually put them in a contact management system and have a more effective database, which is not necessarily, don't think of this obtaining permission, like asking if you can follow up with them. I don't have to ask Vicky to follow up with her. I didn't have to ask her once I got that new address to send her the postcard so she's not gonna be creeped out when she gets it. She's not. Brad Korn sells real estate. He knows where everybody lives. She knows how we are about our database. She knows what I did to find her address. And she's now on a drip plan that there's going to be a call that pops up shortly after she gets the postcard. And she's going to be like, oh my God, how are you? It's been so long, blah, 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 blah. And here we go. And it's got a drip plan and the calls are programmed for the next year out. And she's going to get tips on helping her with her real estate business, even though she knows what they are and she watched them go out because they haven't changed in 20 years. And a lot of it's still the same stuff that I send out because most people don't really pay attention to it. We're just going for the branding, right? But anyway, that effective one is now I can collect more personal information. Like I know her daughter just bought her first house. I didn't know that till Vicky popped up on my radar and I went to look for her and spent the 5 minutes. And it's not so much I was creeping, but I was like, oh my gosh, her daughter bought her first house. That is so freaking awesome. Her daughter used to hang out in our office. So I found bits and pieces of information that are now in there. The segment and group based on 1 to 6 and purposeful and consistent communication. For the most part, guys, my contact management system, 98% of the people aren't moving. I just have a generic follow-up system that has chicken soup from the soul stories. It's got a couple things about real estate. It's got personal stuff. It's got area things that are going on around the community. It's not always about real estate. Once that person is deciding to do something with real estate, we will stop the generic plan and start the get your house ready to sell plan, or start the now you're on an MLS search plan until you find a house plan. And that message is about, hey, have you been checking those listings that we've been sending you? Those are brand new. You're the first one to know about them. Hey, have you been driving by those properties? If it's a first time buyer, like an internet lead that we've converted, it's got, have you gotten pre-approved? And in our campaign or action plan, or the SMART plan, if you're using command, that SMART plan has several things that come out of that. The first thing goes out and says, hey, here's a couple lenders you should get approved with. And we got the first one real big and a secondary one kind of small, right? And then it goes out in a letter, and that way they got it in an email, they got it in a letter. And then we have a to-do that pops up for us to call the lender and see if they've called to get approved yet. So that might be 3 days after we've set them up on an MLS search that they said, hey, yeah, we are probably thinking about doing something. We just don't know for sure when. It's like, great, we'll just get you really in tune with the market. We'll start sending you properties every day that's hitting like where you would want to move to or would want to buy. And we'll go ahead and get the pre-approval process started now, just so you got that out of the way and figure out what you can qualify for today. We can always update it later if you don't move for 6 months or a year. We'll update that later, but we'll get that stuff started and we'll start sending you properties. And then see, everything's just kind of going out saying, are you driving by them? Make sure you text us if you see something you like. And there are calls layered in there too now, about twice a week, to just call and say, hey, did you get the properties? Yeah, we've gotten them. Okay, great. Well, I'm just telling you, I'm just sending them so you can be familiar with the market. But it might be another buyer. It's like, well, I'm just calling to make sure you are driving by those because I know you're starting to get serious. So when I'm in relationship with those people, I know where they really are in that process. but that smart plan is keeping everything in check to move them towards buying a house and to keep us in touch with them at a little different level than maybe just 4 times a year. And I'm going to explain this last one, and then I'll pause out for a second, see if you guys have any questions about what you guys are doing around your databases or anything. And that's when you get it to the exceptional level. Everything's automated. It's custom communication. It's built around triggers. And the one caution I'm going to tell you here is that exceptional is after 10, 15, 20 years of a database being touched on personally and building the plans and having all the different plans that you might have, the smart plans that you may have. I will tell you, more stuff is automated, because if I'm in touch with somebody 4 times a year, say for 3 years straight, do it 100% to the book, to the T, right? So I've called them 4 times a year for 3 years. I've called them 12 times in the last 3 years. They just hear my voice, or they've got my voicemail. Maybe year 4, 5, and 6, or maybe from year 5 to 10, they only have to hear from me twice a year. And then maybe one of my team members starts taking over 2 of the calls a year. So they're still getting 4 calls a year, but over that next year 3, 4, and 5, I'm starting to introduce my team into the picture, like who's replacing me as I'm leveraging myself out. And I have coached many families where it's the kids that are taking over the parents' business, and the parents need to retire, but they really won't quit coming to the office, and the kids are kind of running the business. And I've always coached, let them be as involved as they want, let them do whatever they want. But what you do is you just have them call every client once a year, and you just give them 5 or 10 people a week and just say, hey, if you get a chance, these are some people you might want to follow up with if you feel like getting on the phone and doing some real estate stuff. Because then they get to go still do coffees, they get to go meet people. I mean, when those people come up and they're talking to them regularly, they're usually calling the kids going, hey, they're ready to do something. You let them go show them the house. I mean, if they're really truly their past client, but they can be as involved as they want to be or not. If I gave them that list and they didn't call everybody on the list, and we're talking exceptional database 10 years down the road, I don't really care if they called them or didn't call them. I don't care which ones they called and which ones they didn't call, because we've got the other back end stuff going that's all coming from them anyway. And over the years, we've built that relationship with them anyway. So that's when we say automated. Just be very, very careful, because I will tell you, until you've done this for 20,000 hours, anything automated is trouble. I've got the results of 2 years of thinking I turned my database over to somebody that was going to run it even better than me. And I ran mine pretty tight. And they didn't do anything for 2 years, and the plans ended. See, every smart plan has 1 step at the end. The 8x8 isn't 8 steps, it's 9 steps. There's always 1 step at the end of every single smart plan. And that is, guess, what would you guess it is? Start the next plan. Because if I have a few hundred people running and plans are ending at different times, I'm not going to know when that plan ends a month from now. I don't even remember who I talked to 3 months ago who's coming today until their name shows up on my task list for the day and I print off my calls for today. I wasn't even thinking about most of these people. I talked to them 3 months ago or left them a voicemail 3 months ago. They weren't doing anything at the moment. So, oh yeah, okay, cool. So anyway, that's where automation is over a long period of time, when you are branded permanently in these people's minds, and you don't have to call them 4 times a year, 20 years from now or 10 years from now. But for 3 years, you probably do. And maybe for 5 years. Remember, they move every 5 to 7 years. Once you've moved somebody 2 or 3 times, it's where you also got to be careful. Now I say that. You move them 2 or 3 times, they still haven't moved for 5 to 7 years. So they still, every single client comes in for the buyer consultation whenever they buy, even if they're a 3rd-time client, because they don't remember the process. And the process changes in real estate about every 6 months as well. So don't get too automated, because that's when trouble happens, where what I found recently with those plans stopping and these cards that I was printing off and how many old addresses I really do have in there, that if you're not touching it every single day and massaging it and really keeping in relationship, you'll lose touch with it. All right, so let me pause there for a minute before we get into why using a database and pulling the class together and get you guys out of here for your spend the rest of your Martin Luther King Day. And we'll wrap this up with a really big, important piece about the database. Any questions from anybody so far about what we're talking about, relationships, an effective versus an exceptional database? Okay. I guess, am I intriguing you guys enough that you're thinking about your database even a little more different? As long as I've been around talking about this, is it still come across like I need to hear this more and more and more? Are you guys getting good stuff? Maybe everybody fell asleep. I'm not sure. That's okay.
No, we're awake. Yes, everything's good.
Gotcha. Okay, I just like to hear and check in and see, guys. So I appreciate that. Thank you. So here's the why a database, why a contact management system. You got to avoid the today trap. And when I said I can look at your database, if you haven't had me look at your database and let me tell you what your business is, I will do it. Just meet me at the office or let's do a Zoom and I'll look at your database and I'll tell you, I can predict things about your database. But the database is a predictable return on investment based on the number of people that are in there. If you have 1,000 connections, it's going to be 100 transactions fall out of the sky transactions. You really have an opportunity for about 200 transactions, and it won't matter if you're capturing them all. In fact, you don't even have to capture them all, because if you've got 200 opportunities coming, you're going to be able to take the ones that really are fall out of the sky, and you can refer the other ones, or team members can take them for you. And that's one of the things that will be your value proposition later, not to bring in internet leads, but to hand them done, ready to go, already trusted advisor clients. Sorry, we did a lot of screaming at the Chiefs game last night, and it was 30 degrees outside. So the two types of business are today's business and tomorrow's business. And 98 people are going into tomorrow's business, and one person is going into today's business. That, I think I've hammered that one, but watch what happens. So you get a database with, say, 100 people in it. That database, or that list of people, however they got in there, whatever you have right now, there's going to be a certain portion that's just not buying, they're renting, not going to be doing anything anytime soon, right? The biggest portion of the database, though, is not doing anything right now today, right? There's a smaller portion that there's going to be, out of 100 people, there's going to be 7 or 8 people that are probably doing something in the next 6 months. But there's 100 people in your database. So the 100 people in there just getting email blasted drip stuff doesn't matter, because there's only like 6, 7, or 8 of them are actually going to be doing something. So what they figured out, and this is kind of the 10% to 20% rule that we talked about, it's the 5 to 10 year, with 7 year being the average. You're talking about 10 to 1 or 14 to 1 average ROI on a database. And that is if you are in touch with and communicating with regularly all of them to find that 10% conversion rate. Now, this talks about your investment in your dollars that you invest in your database, and that's based on, you know, what a postage stamp cost and all that other stuff. I don't really get into that a whole lot. The return on investment out of the database is going to be a 20% conversion rate every year. It's going to be 100% conversion rate over a 5 or 7 year period. So spending a couple stamps on note cards here and there, and layering in a couple mailers and a couple emails or a couple texts or a couple social media touches. But the key thing is definitely the phone calls. And we're going to hit that in about a second. But the lowest lead cost is the working with the people that already know you, like you, and trust you, that you built a relationship with. The database and those relationships and building that pipeline will prevent you from having to go buy leads or invest in trying to get them to call you when they are ready, because you're so top of mind from so much communication with them. You're actually going to get the call back from them when they're ready to do something. So when you're developing your database, this is what we were talking about. Marketing is going to take money and time, and you got to run it for a long period of time. And you're trying to convince somebody that doesn't already know you, like you, and trust you to pick up the phone and call you. Right now, you can do this with people that you haven't talked to in a while, but they're probably just about like haven't met again. If you just did a postcard mailing to your entire high school yearbook, I mean, 90% of those people are probably throwing your card in the trash because they're not buying or selling right now. The 10% that actually remembered you from high school might look and laugh at a couple of things, or might even notice it a little bit. But it's the prospecting part of just staying in touch. And when I say prospecting, guys, there's a point where if you did 5 a day, 100 people a month, 1,200 people a year, and then you're calling them 4 times a year, that your prospecting time on the phone is actually just following up. The fortune is in the follow-up. That's what everybody says, but nobody follows up consistently, persistently on an automated, regimented schedule, right? So staying in touch with them will be the biggest ROI you can have, and it doesn't take very much at all. Okay, just real quick, I know we're just a few minutes over. We get into a little bit of the command stuff. I'm going to tell you all this stuff on tags and tagging what their hobbies and their interests are. And the next one is like color coding and all that stuff. You do not need to know any of this in command today. You don't need to know any of this in command for the next month. You don't need to know any of this about coloring and tagging for the next 3 months. Until you are feeding in 5 people from your master list every single day, and you do that for 3 months, now I've got 300 people in command, for example, or whatever your database is. Until I've done that, I really don't need to worry about what I'm tagging them in, because whatever I didn't do with those last 300 people that I just put in, until I develop the habit of putting in people every single day, then I really don't need the tags. And the tags and the color coding is for bulk marketing, not one-on-one follow-up stuff and building relationships. It's all bulky, because now I need to pull up the bulk of people that are horse lovers. There will be a reason to do that for certain things, but not until you're really into relationship with them in the first place. So until you're feeding in 5 a day, you do not need to know any of this stuff. In fact, your reward after putting 300 people is now you give yourself permission to start on a smart plan. What would be the best smart plan for these 300 people that I put in? And you might have 3 or 4 or 5 different smart plans, but try to keep them bulked in a group in your head that way by the generic plan versus somebody that you're sending properties to versus somebody that might be an investor versus somebody that might be out of the area. I just gave you 5 campaigns right there. But until you're putting in 300 people, if you put them in a 1 today and then 1 in a week from now, and you want to create campaigns, and you've got 1,000 different campaigns running for 1,000 different people, it doesn't need to be that way. Feed in your people every single day first before you start getting into all that stuff. And this is where I was saying, we were talking earlier about if you're really not connected with them, if they were just nice and didn't hang up, but they were short and you couldn't tell me if they have kids or dogs or anything about them, they're probably a lead. In fact, most of your database right now is probably just a lead. Even if you know them or met them, if you haven't talked to them or reconnected with them in the last 4 weeks or shorter, 3 weeks or 2 weeks, you probably haven't talked to them enough to really be connected. So you can go through your database from A to Z and decide if they're a lead or a contact. If a contact is 36 touches and it's 4 phone calls and it's all these other little touches and promotional items and touching them on social media, guys, I mean, if you go from A to Z, if you can't send them 36 touches because that'd be spam, you're not connected with them. They're really still, they've moved back out to the lead world. So be very careful about what you put on people there. And then they talk about, you know, the ways to tend your database or build a culture around testimonials and reviews and regularly update and prune your database. If you're just feeding in connections and writing a handwritten note, knowing that 98% of them are not buying real estate right now, and your message isn't all about real estate, it doesn't have to be around these things. I mean, the testimonials are good to layer in there every once in a while because you want to be their expert go-to person for real estate. And regularly pruning the database, I mean, if they live in the community, they're in my database until they die, basically. Even when they leave the area, they're going to get the long distance follow-up stuff from me from that. So anyway, that's our content for today. Oh, and I'll give you, I mean, if you're still here and you haven't left yet, there's a QR code here, and I'll throw it in the chat box too, just to give if you don't mind checking in this and just let me know how today went, what you liked about it, what you liked about the information. That's a great way for us just to get your feedback on what you loved about it. What was your aha from today? And you can just scan it with your phone as well. So seriously, guys, for you guys hanging in there and showing up for this today, it's about connecting with people every single day. Don't let the real estate overshadow. If you're newer in real estate and you do not have a consistent flow of business yet, don't try to go be real estate agent and have 10 deals next month. Go meet 10 people and then stay in touch with them. Become the go-to person, knowing that they're not buying right now. It will lead to more opportunities for you to go out there and play real estate agent. But you just want to take an hour a day and just be a person. Connect, be a people, what's going on, how you doing, how's the family? And then you can go play real estate all you want. But those real estate deals, if you've been out there feeling like you're spinning your wheels, it's because less than 1% of that will turn into business. So really get focused on your people, get focused on your master list, and the rest is going to come. I'll still help you get the deal. If you've got to get some real estate deals going, call me, talk to me, text me, whatever. I'm available for you. But we're going to probably come back to this list. You have a master list. Let's get it built while we're figuring out what is the fastest way to get the next deal. But there is no secret pill we're hiding from y'all. There is nothing that's like, okay, well, if you need a deal, then I'm going to tell you the super secret way to do open houses. No, it's all just doing it consistently, persistently, week in, week out, and not do anything randomly or pop shot. So hopefully this was good stuff for you guys, and we can help you get a very consistent, persistent, predictable real estate business. And this is all recorded, so you can go back and listen to this again. Was this a good session today, guys? Hit your unmute button, flash your little
Yes,
thumbs up.
it was good. Thank you, Brad.
You betcha. So glad you made it. Thanks for the question, Steve. That was awesome. I hope you loved the class and really got a lot out of it. I see Jackie and Allison are still in the room too. Way to go, girls. Hopefully you guys are all having fun. I see David still hanging with us too. So glad you all made it today. Hopefully you found this useful, and I'm available for you. Call me if you have any questions.
Bye.